Okay, here we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our joint masterclass Unseen, How to Become Part of the Memories Again. We are so excited to be here with you tonight. I know for many of us in the US, it's been a tough week. As you can hear, I sound really good. I apologize. This is probably the highest that my voice can go. But small miracles, this is the best I've sounded all week. So we're going to get into this. I'm so excited to be here with you. We're going to just jump right in. We're so glad that you have just taken the time to be in this class. And we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to share a little bit about the expectations, and then we're going to jump right in. If you are just hopping on the call now, we'd love to hear from you. So you can share your name, where you're from, and then you could either share why you joined this class, or what picture grief means to you. So I'm going to get started right away. Some of you familiar, I know you, I've seen you. So glad you're here. Um, so you know me, but if you don't know me, other than my social media, or maybe you came through Lindley's channels, my name is Bree. I live in the state of New Jersey. And I was just telling Lindley, who initiated sharing what land she's on, right? Recognizing that privilege. And since I'd moved, I hadn't looked that information up. So in New Jersey, I am on Mohican and Munsee Lenape land. I identify as a fat, white, cis, female, ADHD, and I am a trained therapist in the state of New Jersey. But I love talking about body image. And so I also identify as a body image coach. I have really worked and created a framework around body grief, and I have a community for body grievers. And I really love being able to educate people on how to hate their bodies less. And what we're going to talk about tonight is why that matters, why hating your body less is important beyond just ourselves. Some other information from me as well is I also do supervision with providers and have recently also got into some business coaching because once I figure out a problem, I'm like, I want to help everybody solve this problem. So Lindley and I have connected, and it's a funny story. We talked about it in our live. Lindley was probably one of the first podcast episodes that she was a guest on that I heard somebody talking about fatness in a way that resonated with me. And so like I went and followed her and had been following her. So it's a little bit of a dream come true to be getting to do a joint masterclass with her. So Lindley, I'm gonna pass the mic to you.
Yeah, and now I don't know if it was on the Instagram Live that we talked about it or on your podcast, but we talked about how before we connected personally, Bree had been like fangirling a little bit at me, and I had been fangirling at Bree because of the work that Bree does. Uh, so being here tonight in this joint class is such a dream come true for me too, because I feel like our work complements each other so well. And particularly when we talk about photos and bodies and grieving and body image, as we developed the materials for this class, it just felt like it just dovetailed so wonderfully. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm a photographer. I'm here outside Seattle in Renton, Washington. I'm also, my work eh, is so different from most photographers that it almost feels like it's not photography at all. I know sounds really trite. I'm so excited. I'm stumbling over my words. But it's telling body stories through images. And so it is as much activism as it is photography. And it's fighting weight stigma, fighting the systems of power that we're going to be talking about tonight. But the short version is to say I'm a photographer and body liberation activist. I have my fingers in a lot of pie because I get bored easily. So I photograph stock photos. I photograph clients for boudoir portraits, small business branding. I do a lot of of work where I'm blending all these things together. So I'll have somebody come in and we do body image work with their photos, and we do some headshots while they're there. We do some sexy and some non-sexy portraits, and this blending of everything. But beyond that, I do a lot of writing. I'm a health at every size consultant, and I am a white cisgender autistic woman. I'm 44. I had to think about that. This year has felt like 10 years, so I don't even know what day it is half the time. But I do use she, her pronouns, and I'm on Duwamish land here outside Seattle. The Duwamish tribe is unusually for here in the United States. They do exist. They're alive and well as a group, and I do pay them a little bit of money every month to help offset the injustice of having their land lived on by other people. And I encourage you to do that too if you would like to do that. And there is no tribal group where you are at who originally owned this land. If you're interested in doing that, they're at realrentduwamish.org, and you can find that information on my website as well. Back to Bree.
I actually think you are going to go over expectations and then go right into
That's true.
expectation.
I told you as soon as I
All
logged on to this, all the things that we discussed just completely went out of my head.
all good.
So, and this is always as we get started, every time I do a talk on anything, I get tangled up here at the beginning, and it's always a good opportunity for me to talk about business and vulnerability. So you're seeing vulnerability in action. We're all vulnerable here tonight, and Bree and I are no exceptions to that. So that's what you're seeing right now. Anyhow, what to expect tonight? Some vulnerability, obviously, right here from the start. But we're going to talk about the history of fatness and why that matters to how you feel about images right now. Because there are through lines, hundreds and hundreds of years of history that affect how you feel about your body and what's going on in your brain right now. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about where Western beauty standards come from, and again, how it affects us as individuals. We're going to talk about giving you a framework to navigate how you feel when you are taking pictures of yourself or people are taking pictures of you, and practical steps to physically get back into those photos so that you have a good experience, or at least a neutral experience, when you get in photos, and how to deal with that physically and emotionally, is all the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. And so it's kind of funny to talk about, oh, we're going to get you back into photos and start off talking about the 1400s, but that's essentially what we're going to do, because beauty is determined by the things around us. We are not born knowing that blonde hair is more attractive than brunette hair, or that having some freckles is cute, but maybe it wasn't always, but it is right now. Like these things, or that white skin is more attractive than black skin, or that thin bodies are more attractive than fat ones. We're not born knowing that. We spend our entire lives learning these systems, and nobody sits us down as 3-year-olds and says, "Okay, honey, these bodies are good and these bodies are bad." Like nobody is doing that. And yet 3-year-olds, literally 3-year-olds, know which bodies are considered good and which are considered bad. That's because these systems that are bigger than us determine this. It determines how we think about it. And so there's a really long definition here that I'm going to read you really quickly. But a system of power determines that what we think of as normal. It determines what we think of as beautiful and worthy. And it's really easy for us, especially because American society is really individualistic, to think, well, I determine what's beautiful, or maybe I personally consider inner beauty to be where it's really at. And like, to a certain extent, but you are influenced by these systems, whether you realize it or not. And so when I say system of power, what I'm talking about, the definition that's here on the slide, is the beliefs, practices, and cultural norms on which individual lives and institutions are built. They are rooted in social constructions of race and gender and embedded in history, colonization, slavery, migration, immigration, genocide. I'm going to add sexism and fat phobia to that list, as well as present day policies and practice. Again, this is really heavy stuff when all you want to do is not feel bad about taking a selfie. But part of looking at these systems of power is learning how to navigate them so that you are absolutely crushed trying to take a selfie because you've spent your entire life being steeped in these systems. And the only other thing I want to point out here is this is also why the bodies that you see in the media don't match the bodies that you see around you at like the grocery store. It's because these systems of power are determining the bodies that are desirable to be seen. Hence the entire name of our workshop, Unseen Tonight. We are taught that only certain bodies are worthy of being seen. And part of the way that we're taught that is these are the ones that we see displayed. So keep that in mind as we go on. All right, now we go back to the 1400s. Okay, so this is where it starts. We have probably always, in human history, we have probably always had some sort of values associated with bodies. Um, you know, this is my speculation. I'm not an academic, but I'm betting that 30,000 years ago, as the first humans were emerging, they had ideas about what bodies were more suited for a particular task, or maybe this body has a certain value or not associated with it because maybe it can or can't bear a child, whatever. The point is that the systems that we're talking about today started to be developed in the 1400s. And part of what I want you to understand about systems is that they're not accidents. They're not, it's not like a plant, like a tree just happened to grow over here because a seed fell. These are deliberate acts that people have done. Um, and so in the 1400s, some wealthy white European men who had far too much time on their hands began this search that seemed like a very high-minded thing for what does ideal beauty look like? What does beauty mean? And it was always focused on white women when we're talking about beauty. When you see like Renaissance statues, late medieval statues, when you think about the painting of Venus rising up out of the foam in the giant scallop shell. You know that painting, right? People, nod at me, people. Okay, I'm not losing you. Presenting to a camera is very strange because people just stare at you. But anyhow, the point is that we start to have these statues and these paintings and these drawings that are partly focused on white men, rich white men's aesthetic ideals of what is beauty. And so they wrote letters back and forth and really had all these debates on, well, is it mathematically based? Like, these mathematic proportions, or do you just know it when you see it? And race was intrinsically part of this from the very beginning, because men like Peter Paul Rubens, whose self-portrait is there on the slide, who lived in the late 1500s, early 1600s, um, he was one of the first ones to really come right out and be like, yeah, white women are the most beautiful. But the thing is that before this, there wasn't really a concept of race. So what was happening at the same time that these guys were being like, we just want to find who's the fairest of them all, mirror, mirror on the wall. Um, Racism was starting to be developed as a concept because slavery was picking up as a concept. Um, African slavery. And, I'm getting tangled up in my words again because this is hard to talk about. Like, I made jokes on these slides to help keep it a little lighter, but it really sucks. It sucks to see, people portrayed like the lower image on this slide. It sucks to think about people being treated as property, but that's what was happening. And so, as slave ships were coming from Africa to Europe, the intellectual frameworks were being developed to justify this. And so at the same time that that these guys were being like, okay, but which women really are the hottest? What is the ideal of beauty? Um, these ideas were immediately being used for racist purposes to help define what is a white woman, what is a black woman, what is other, what is us and what is them. And the point of this is that we're already really seeing this by the 1700s. It's really kicked into gear. And I encourage you to Google this later because the whole thing is fascinating. We could be here for days just talking about the history of this. But there was a woman who lived in the late 1700s named Sarah Bartman. Her name is there on the slide. Again, Google this, really interesting. But she was one of the people who was a slave whose body was used as evidence that Black people, particularly Black women, were inferior. And so these systems were being developed hundreds of years before we were born. If you want more information on this, the place to go is a book called Fearing the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. It is, if you are interested in any concepts of liberation, it is the place to go. It's not easy reading. It's kind of academic. And again, a lot of this subject matter is really heavy, but that is where you really need to be if you want to understand why we feel about our bodies the way we do. So we're gonna skip forward really, just a few hundred years, no biggie, nothing much happening. But we're gonna skip forward to the 1890s really quickly, and talk about Charles Dana Gibson. Gibson created this concept. He was a commercial artist, and so he did advertising images and like illustrations for the Sunday Evening Post, that sort of thing. And he created this concept called the Gibson girl, which you may have heard of. This is one of these that is really like popularized even today. So you may have seen these images. They're very sort of these elegant women with these big poofy hairstyles that just sort of gaunt and being elegant all over. Um, Interestingly, if you also look at the rest of his work, if you Google for him, he did a lot of artwork that had these Gibson girl type women doing strange things to little bitty men that were just like a few inches high. Like, guess we're fitting our kinks on Maine here. But at any rate, Bree has said in the comments too that also recommend Belly of the Beast. It's a book by Deshaun Harrison. Also absolutely recommend. It is another book that talks about these systems of power and oppression and how they affect bodies, particularly in prison systems. And so yeah, that's another book. Highly recommend. I've lost my presenter window. Okay, so the Gibson girl. The Gibson girl was this composite of traits. And we're going to talk about what that means here in a second. But basically, this was a fictional type of woman who was both sexy and respectable. And so this became this major influence on beauty standards, on advertising, on media, on culture, that is still reflected today. Think about what celebrities you can think of that have body types similar to this. I guarantee you, as you look at the silhouette that is on that slide, you can probably think of some celebrities. There is a reason that this body type is glamorized even today, 140 years later. I have made up a title for this artwork. I couldn't actually find a title for it, so I've called it the Bang Maid. Because that is mine, not Gibson's. But because for the first time in sort of pop culture, we have this composite of the sort of the wife who would make your meals and sew your buttons back on your shirts and be the homemaker for you, and the mistress who was sexy and decorative and like good in bed. For the first time, these concepts were combined. And so it meant that for men, men were really into this beauty standard because it meant that they could demand the Madonna and the whore at the same time. Um, you could have both the elegant lady and the tavern wench. You could have the peasant and the noble woman at the same time. And if you're a sexist white dude, especially one with some money, that's pretty appealing. Like, why not demand this in every woman around you? So it became this very popular beauty standard that is, we're still very much under that standard now. And so if you want to see these previous concepts that this composite came from, of the fragile lady, and the voluptuous woman, the tavern wench, look at Ariel and Ursula. Especially folks, I'm 44, like I grew up with The Little Mermaid. I love the animated movie. And also you can very easily see these concepts at work in this movie. And so as we come into the 20th century, that is where we stand. But in the 20th century, we have world wars, we have massive technological improvements, we have massive cultural change. And every time in the 20th century that women gained power, every single time, beauty standards changed to be more and more and more challenging to meet, to keep us busy. And as I talk about these beauty standards too, I meant to mention this earlier. I talk a lot about women here because the historical sources and our cultural sources are focused on white cis women. Obviously, these things are not going to be true for everybody. Obviously, when we talk about women gaining the vote, not every woman gained the vote in the US at the same time. When we talk about beauty standards change in different communities. They are all affected by the same history, but also, I don't have information sources that really reflect, uh, the effects of these beauty standards over time historically on people who aren't cis white women, because those people were ignored in the research. And so I think it's really important to be clear that these standards and the things that I'm talking about are focused on white cis women, not because I'm trying to focus, but because that's the data that I have to pull from. So as we think about the 20th century, think about, some women gaining the vote. Think about World War II. World War II, women in the workforce, and advertising changed. It began targeting pretty as opposed to functional. When we see the 1960s with sexual freedom, we start seeing a focus on in media and advertising on extreme thinness. Think about Twiggy, the model. 1980s, we have the working woman, more women in the workforce, and we have these surge of fad diets and like aerobics and jazzercise. And today we have the body positivity movement going more mainstream, and we have a renewed focus on weight loss medications and surgery. These things are not coincidences. These are systems of power that are fighting back to perpetuate themselves. And if you take nothing else away from this segment of this, the take that these systems of power that were developed by some bored white dudes in the 1400s have turned into, you know, CoverGirl. These things are not coincidental. I'm done yelling. All yours, Brie.
I don't know if you saw in the chat, but
Oh, I didn't.
it was shared that by that Ursula was styled after a drag queen.
Yes.
I did not know that. That is very interesting. I love that.
Yeah, it was styled after the John Waters drag queen, named Divine. And yeah, and that adds an extra layer of complication to Ursula,
Sure.
from that movie as well.
We could probably go off on a whole tangent about fatness in the media and the representation.
Mhm.
I think that when you think about now I feel like we have a lot more, but yeah, like when you thought about fat characters, it's Ursula, it's LeFou, there's a cast type. But that's a different presentation. So coming back to pictures. You can actually do this. You can do it as a thought exercise, whatever you want. But I want you to think of or pull up a picture on your phone. So you can do it as a thought exercise. It can be your favorite photo. It can be a current photo or a younger photo. And I want you to think about how you feel when you see this photo. What is the emotional experience you have around this photo? What are the memories that you have surrounding the photo? And the reason I want us to do this is because we have to be able to connect to the emotion. We connect so easily sometimes when it's a negative or distressful a feeling, but we often forget what it feels like when we experience joy or gratitude or nostalgia when we look at a photo. And so, if you want to share what emotions are elicited as you're thinking about the photo you pulled or the photo you're thinking about, I'll share about my photo. This was a photo shoot I had done. Uh, I can't tell you when. I think I want to say it was October 2021. So it was post pandemic, and a former body griever of mine had asked me to officiate her wedding. And I mean, when I look at this photo, I remember not only did I, for the first time, really just feel like I embodied my full self. Like it was the first fat photo shoot that I had done, that I had scheduled. And I just really felt like what I saw on the outside is what I felt on the inside. And that felt really, really, really cool. And so I want us to consider, right? What is the purpose of photos? Why do we why do we take pictures? If anybody watches Outlander, I'm going to spoil a part for you. If you haven't, she brings photos back in time, and he's looking at the picture like it's sorcery. Like, what do you mean you can show me a picture? And it's so interesting that, I grew up in the 90s. I remember you had to wait for film to get developed before you could see a photo. Right? Like something kids will not understand. Like, I think there's like a TikTok trend where it's like you can tell a generation by asking how you pick up a phone or how you take a picture, right? Um, our generation was taking a photo, right? But we have to think about why. Why why do we take photos? Um, Oftentimes it can be because we want to commemorate or remember something. Or maybe you want to remember someone. Maybe it's to convey a feeling. I think photos can be planned, they can be staged, they can also be impromptu. We take headshots for work, for professional settings. Somebody snaps a candid while, you're uh, taking a photo with your niece and nephew on Christmas. And so I think that we have to really come down to what is the purpose of a photo? And the question that we need to ask ourselves is, does a photo need to be beautiful? And I'm going to show you a series of 3 photos. And I want you to consider the emotional experience you have as you see these pictures. The first photo, I'm going to get choked up. This is the first photo that my realtor took of me as I was doing a final walkthrough on, on my house. And she said, say, welcome home. And I just started to cry. Does this photo need to be beautiful? Does this photo need to be beautiful? Does this photo need to be beautiful? I want to define beauty. I really recommend the book. And Lindley, if you could just type this into the chat. Jess Baker wrote a book many eons ago called Things No One Tells Fat Girls. And there's this quote here that I want to read in its entirety. I know it's long. The words beautiful and pretty mean two different things to me. Beauty is something that is everywhere. The sunset is beautiful. Human connection is beautiful. Kindness is beautiful. Bodies are beautiful. All of them. Beauty is ubiquitous, inherent, and found in all of us, on the outside and the inside. The word pretty, however, when used to describe a woman's physical experience, signifies to me a physical idea that's fabricated by companies to make you believe that you'll never be enough until you reach it. Pretty is whatever they want you to believe in. Pretty is what causes women to battle each other. Pretty has been created to always be exclusive. Pretty is a made up lie created to line the pockets of money hungry assholes. So fuck pretty, reclaim beauty.
Yeah, speaking of one of the most famous beauties of all time, I'm betting that you know who this woman is. Go ahead and type it in the chat for me. Who is this woman and who painted her?
I was never very good at art history, but
Karen says, I feel like this is a trick question. It's not a trick question, but we're going to build on it. I promise. You're not going to do it wrong. There is no doing it wrong here. Now everybody's suspicious of me and nobody, okay, we've had one person who's willing to answer it. I think, Brie, I think I've scared them. It's not a trick question. This is the painting is called the Mona Lisa, by Leonardo da Vinci. Um, Now don't go Google this right quick. Again, you cannot do this wrong. But does anybody know who the actual woman is? Like what her name was? I had to look this up too. Like I said, you're not doing it wrong. I'm gonna give it a second just to see if anybody happens to know. Okay, yeah. Again, when I
that guessing it's not Lisa.
actually her first day. Okay, so we don't actually know for absolutely certain who this woman was. The theory is that it was a woman whose first name was Lisa. Lisa, my Italian pronunciation is terrible, so please forgive me for butchering this. Lisa Gherardini del Giocondo. And if anybody wants that later, ping me and I'll give you the name. But you can Google for who was the Mona Lisa actually as a person. I've said Google and my phone thinks I'm talking to it. I'm gonna turn it over so it goes away. So this is Lisa. Um, but think about the fact that you probably knew either immediately or with a little bit of thinking, like the name of the painting and who the painter was, but we don't even know for sure who the woman in it was. Because when we think about beauty and we think about history, yes, I'm coming back to systems of power. That's the trick. I'm always thinking about power. So everything comes back to power with me. And when we think about the Mona Lisa, I want you to think about that power imbalance. You know, one of the most famous painters of all time, and then this woman who we don't even know for sure who she was. Okay, now go ahead and type in the chat who this woman is. You may or may not know. A lot of people know this woman and this family, and there are a lot of opinions on this woman and her family. That is okay. Um, Whether you like this person or hate this person, again, I want you to be thinking about women in power. All right, yeah, no surprise here. This is Kim Kardashian, one of the famous or infamous Kardashian family. And what I want you to be thinking about when we think about women and power and images, this is where this comes together. One of the reasons that Kim Kardashian became so famous was her selfies. And what I want you to understand about this is that this is the first time in history that women's images have not been in the hands of men. I cannot emphasize to you how earth shattering this is. This is a fundamental change in history. We are at the start of, there's this concept in science fiction of the singularity. Um, Again, I keep saying go Google these things because they're all, interesting more than we have time for here. But there's this concept of the singularity that is this concept of a moment uh that after that moment, everything is so different that it's hard to even explain to someone who lived before that moment. When we talk about gender and power and images, oh, this is the singularity. I just I cannot emphasize how powerful this is for people to have control of their own images. If you had lived 100 years ago, if you had lived 500 years ago, or any other time in history, and you were a marginalized person of any kind, particularly women, um, if you were going to be portrayed in any way by somebody, it was probably going to be by a man, and the man would be controlling how you were portrayed and getting all the fame and glory from that and power and money. And Kim Kardashian was one of the first people to very publicly break that barrier. And so, one Kim Kardashian is so hard to talk about because we are so polarized around the Kardashians. But I also want you to maybe think about, it's possible that part of the reason that Kim in particular is so controversial is because she took her own power in this very public way. And yes, of course, Kim Kardashian has been photographed by very famous photographers before, but these selfies were part of the reason that she is so well known today. Taking that power into her own hands. And like I don't have to personally like her to appreciate how important that is historically. And so you have this power too. This is also the first time in history that on this one level, we have essentially the same power as someone very wealthy. Um, that's Again, this is earth shattering. And yeah, if you go post on your Instagram, you are not going to have the same number of people to see that, or possibly to throw money at you, as Kim Kardashian does, mind you. But just having control over your own image is so important because it means that you now have that tool that you can use. You can use it for survival. You can use it for compliance with standards, and we're going to talk about what that means. You can use it for self-acceptance, but it is a tool that you now have. And I just get so passionate about these things because, again, that gives us the ability to take our power back. And it allows us to give power to each other. This beautiful woman in this photo, this is my best friend. And I took this photo of her. She didn't take it, but but I wanted to illustrate that because at what point in the past would a very fat person have been able to be portrayed in a positive light? Never, ever, ever, ever until now. And so that's what we're doing here. We're like seizing power and taking it back into our own hands through our images. And that sounds really revolutionary. Like it sounds very torch waving when we're really just talking about getting a family photo. But it really is that important and that freeing. And so as we talk about this, I want to say really quickly a word about flattering. Um, think about when you hear the word flattering, like what that means to you. And it's probably going to mean something a little bit different to everybody. But often when we say the word flattering, we mean as thin as possible. When we say these jeans are flattering, we often mean, oh, they're going to make us look thinner. Or we say, oh, that's a flattering, oh, that pose is flattering. Or that selfie angle is flattering because it hides our double chin. We often mean as thin as possible. And so I want to say, as we move into the next portion of this, fuck flattering. Fuck it, fuck it, fuck it. Our stories are located in our bodies. When we aim for flattering, and we're going to talk about times when you may want to do that and how that is also a tool. But when you aim for flattering, you are often uh, complying with these beauty standards in a way that erases your stories. When you erase your wrinkles, when you erase your scars, when you hide parts of your body or allow you do or like do a face tuning app that like makes your skin super smooth, that is leaving you bland and blank, and it's taking away your story. Like if I had the person who is in this photo, if I had digitally gone back and like hoiked her boobs, you see how one of them is kind of it either it's a half size larger than the other or it's just not tucked under. If I had gone back and hoiked that, I would have been like literally removing a part of her body and part of her story. Maybe her breasts are different sizes, and it makes it hard for her to find clothing. I don't know. I don't. This isn't somebody that I know well. But I would have been removing part of her story and taking part of the power of her body away. And so when you think about being in images, think about it as a way to tell your own story and to tell who you are without compliance. Because do you want to record yourself as a collection of standards that you're not meeting? Or do you want to record yourself as a being with your own value and your own stories? And so, once again, images are a way of us seizing power to tell our stories. And so Bree has some things that she's also going to say about flattering, and I hope I haven't run over top of what she was going to say to you here, because
No,
again,
not at all. Not at all.
it's so important.
So, yes, right. We love this empowered, like, fuck flattering. And there might have been a teeny part of you that's like, but I do want to look as thin as possible. I do want to exist in a smaller body or not have a double chin or whatever that thing is for you. And this is where body autonomy comes into play, right? And I want to also stress that body autonomy in wanting to look beautiful or thin or whatever is very different than um gender euphoria. So that's a separate thing entirely. But that if you still desire, even if it's a tiny part, that's like, but I still want to like how my body looks in photos. The question I want to ask you is who profits or benefits from that thought? It's most likely not you. In 2020, when the world was in a pandemic, the beauty industry made over $550 billion by pivoting from makeup to focusing on skincare and focusing on how you're showing up on a Zoom camera. There was like an elevated number that year of people who wanted plastic surgery so that their face could match what it looks like with a filter. Somebody profits from our desire for flattery. And again, I want to come back to you have the right to body autonomy. And I also want to share, we're going to get into, Lindley's going to get into this part, but like, I remember when I was starting to learn about these systems, and I'm like, okay, but am I a bad person then if I still want to wear makeup or shave my legs? Or, if I do look at a photo and I don't like how it looks, am I a bad activist? And am I a fraud in the body positive conversation? And I want to come back to a quote, and it was by Sonia Renee Taylor. I want to talk a little bit about the concept, but so she talks about the ladder of beauty being a ladder, that right? We can climb this ladder and we know there's no top. How do we know that there's no arriving? Because look at people like Kim K. Look at people like Oprah, who they have exponential resources, and even still they cannot reach the top of the ladder. They are always going to be climbing. So let's hear what Sonia has to say about this. We can also recognize in this system that there are some of us who will never get there. We have bodies that will live at the top of the ladder. We will spend our lives trying to figure out, what can I do? I can lose 10 pounds here. I can affect my tone so that I sound more white. I can subscribe to rigid rules around gender. And I can do all of these things to try to understand my place in hierarchy, to climb up the ladder of bodily hierarchy. Radical self love invites us to divest from the ladder, because the ladder is only real because we keep trying to climb it. And when we stop trying to climb the ladder, then we have no more use for the ladder. When I don't need the ladder to assess my sense of worthiness, enoughness, inherent divinity. When I don't need that ladder because I understand it as my birthright. I understand it is how I arrived on this planet. I understand it as my own unique form of natural intelligence. Then I have no use for, then the ladder is of no use. The ladder isn't leaning against the system. The ladder is the system. And it is all of the things that we have built to figure out how to attain at the top rung. And if we divest from it, we would collapse all the systems that are built on it. She did this on a podcast with Brene Brown, because during the pandemic, there was a quote from Sonia that was going around being referenced as Brene's quote. And Brene was like, I didn't say that. Sonia Renee Taylor said that. And so she had her on the podcast. And yeah, I really like this concept of, we will always be climbing. We will always be climbing. And so when we give up, when we divest, it might leave us with a feeling of grief, a feeling of loss. Yes, I also agree. The Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor is absolutely a must read. If you had a visceral reaction to radical self love, it's probably going to be a hard read for you. I've had folks who are like, I open it and I'm like, nope, not ready for that. And if that's the case, then I would say start with Jess Baker's book. But yes, if you're like, yes, this resonates with me, Sonia's book, gonna rock your world. So things that we might miss with picture grief, right? Missing a smaller version of ourselves, judging a larger version of ourselves, fear that someone else is going to judge us, letting a single photo ruin our whole day, avoiding events because we don't want to be in photos. And so you have an impossible choice. We either climb the ladder knowing we're never going to get to the top. If Kim K can't do it, none of us are. If Oprah can't do it, the rest of us are screwed. But you can do it, or you can divest from the ladder. But you are going to feel distress and live with the outcomes either way. And so Lindley is going to talk a little bit about the outcomes. But one of the things that I recommend is, can we start to separate our values from diet culture's values? So this is what I call the head to heart disconnect. How many of us are like, I know in my head that I should not care that you can see my double chin in a photo, or that, I look like I've gained weight. That shouldn't bother me as much as it does, but it does in my heart. There's a disconnect from your head and your heart. And here's what's happened is we have been indoctrinated into the cult of diet culture, into these systems, these systems where there's power, and we want that proximity to power and privilege. And so we have been taught all of this. And at some point along the way, we recognized, that's not really nice. Or that's not fair, or I don't like that. And if you've had any moments like that, what that tells me is that there's a divergence in your values versus diet culture's values. And so one way we can divest from the latter is exploring the values that you have in relationship to beauty, flattery, and being in pictures. I think the biggest difference is when we start separating our values, we really get to identify, is my desire for flattery motivated by internal motivation or external motivation? Is my desire for flattery being led by my values? That I believe I am inherently more valuable when I am beautiful? Or is it external motivation, which is often in an avoidance of a consequence, which uh, could be the world is judging you, you lose privileges, you face outward oppression. Am I trying to avoid the oppression, or is it actually aligned with what I believe? And an example of this, right? If I decide not to get in the photo today because you know what? I am feeling really distressed and taking a photo is going to distress me more. I have permission to say, I'm not going to be in the photo today. Thanks, though, guys. That is an internal motivation. Yes, it still might be from a distress rooted in the oppression of beauty and wanting to be flattering, but the autonomy, the decision was made out of protection of self. Whereas if you're not getting in the photo because you're like, oh my gosh, if they take this photo, they're going to see that I've gained weight. Somebody might judge me. I don't know where this photo is going to go. It's going to make me feel like crap. That is an external motivation. And how much of our lives have we given our power away in our agency? How do we get to reclaim that agency? I know I'm noticing the time. I have a proclivity to talk a lot, so I'm going to try to go through these somewhat quickly so we can end on or about our time frame that we gave for you. But this photo I took in 2019. This was a year after I had created, maybe not a full year. Oh, no, it was a full year after I created my Instagram, Body Image with Brie. I was Body Image with Brie at this point. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a photo exposure. Yes. And so what I do, I was like, I'm going to prep for this photo. I'm going to make sure that there's nothing about this photo that's going to make me uncomfortable, but I'm going to buy this crop top. I'm going to get a spray tan. I'm going to get my hair done. I'm going to do everything all the way down to a fake tattoo that was going over my weight loss surgery scar. And I felt so uncomfortable in this photo shoot. So much so, we were supposed to go out for my birthday, and my best friend was like, I think you need to go change. And I was like, why? Does it look bad? And she goes, no, but you look uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, I feel uncomfortable, but I should push past. That's a different conversation for another time. But I was so angry that I couldn't do the exposure because I had set really unrealistic expectations for myself. Here were some of the thoughts that were going through my head. What are people going to think about me when they see my stomach? You're supposed to be a respectable therapist. If you don't do this exposure, everyone's going to know you're a fraud. This is too scandalous for a body like yours to wear. The thoughts that came up in my head were not internal motivation. They were externally motivated. But what was happening was that values that are important to me were being threatened. The fear of not looking like a good therapist threatens my value of success and achievement. People judging me or thinking about my stomach threatens my value for control. My fear of people judging me. What if people don't like me because of what they see? Threatened my fear of belonging. And so if we could just start to prioritize the values that we want to live by and highlight what values are getting threatened when we are in body distress, whether it's taking a picture, whether it's something else, we can quickly highlight what challenges are being uh, what values are being challenged in the face of discomfort. And aligning to your values helps you to respond to body distress with internal motivation instead of external motivation. And regardless whether you climb or divest from the ladder, you're still going to have to brace for the outcome. I'm going to tell a quick story and then I'm going to pass it back to Lindley. But um, I am somebody who I identify as a recovering people pleaser. I want to be a courageous communicator. And I was somewhere where somebody was borrowing something of mine and I really wanted it back. And I was like, it's fine. I don't need it. It's like, started to convince myself. Like, I was like, not a big deal. Also, this is this year. This is like a month ago. This is not that long ago. And even still struggling with, I know it's not true, but the story I'm telling myself is they're going to get upset with me for asking for this thing back. And I don't like how that feels. It's threatening my values. So then something else happened, and I was like, all right, we're going to have to pick. We're going to have one or two courageous conversations. Pick which one. This is the conversation I had in my head. And at the end of the day, it was still an uncomfortable conversation that I had to have. And I had to brace for the outcome. But just because the feelings are uncomfortable in doing the thing or feeling the thing doesn't mean that we shouldn't feel it. We also don't need to feel it all of the way. This came up in a session of mine this week where a client was like, it was distressful, but I just kept going. And I was like, hold on, we don't need to do that. like, like my photo shoot, if I had been coaching me, as soon as I put it on and I felt that level of distress go on, and I walked outside and I was like, this is like an 8 or a 9, I would have said, go change. And then when they would have said, but I feel like a failure, I would have been like, we can deal with that later. We cannot deal with an 8 distress. You are not going to, we're not going to be able to function in this level of distress. So we have to be mindful of ourselves. We're going to get into that in the next session. But right now, Lindley's going to talk about outcomes.
Pro tip, always unmute yourself. Caught it before I started talking. So this gets so complicated because we talked earlier about do I need to feel bad about wearing makeup? Do I need to feel bad about uh, any sort of thing that can be potentially even interpreted as being in compliance with beauty standards? And the thing is that if beauty is a set of standards built over centuries that brings others power and profit, is it possible to shift our thinking? Is it beauty or attractiveness, or is it compliance? Why not both? We are allowed to find pleasure in things or to participate in things or to do things that are also compliance with beauty standards. You get to wear makeup if you want to wear makeup. You get to wear Spanx if you want to wear Spanx. You get to wear high heels. You get to play with gender appearance in a way that might also be in compliance with beauty standards. You get to do those things. A, because you have bodily autonomy. B, because it's complicated. But like Bree was saying, there are also outcomes. Bree says in comments, 1010 recommend thigh society shorts instead of Spanx. Yes. Um, I am not willing to put myself at this moment in a level of discomfort that it would require to wear shapewear. But we're going to talk about that. Snag Tights also has incredible shorts. Thank you, Emily. This is true. So when we talk about outcomes, there are outcomes of any decision we make. Every decision we make in our lives, whether it's related to images or appearance or not, has an outcome. And sometimes not making a choice at all also has an outcome. So, like Brie was saying earlier, these are things that you can't, opt out of necessarily. But we have outcomes for our actions, both personally and on the people and systems around us. So, personally, if you make a decision around being in an image or not, or participating in a beauty standard or not, let's just use wearing makeup actually, because I've got a good example of that. There might be effects that might be either positive or negative on your confidence and self esteem, your own body image, your own feelings of safety or security, your own feelings of aesthetic pleasure. Either way, might be affected by a decision that you make around complying with the beauty standard that is wearing makeup. It might have an effect on your career. You might get approval or disapproval from your social circle, depending on what you choose to do. It might be easier or harder to access healthcare. You might feel like you do or don't reflect your own values. That might be in conflict or not. It might have an effect on how you feel about yourself in the future. But I want you to, hang on, I'm moving windows around. If you can see, actually, can y'all see me at all right now?
Yes, and we see your presenter screen.
Okay. If you can see my face at all right now, I'm leaning over because I have some big red acne spots on my chin, my like lower chin neck right now. And I had to decide before I sat down with Bree and logged into this if I was going to cover those up with makeup. And it turned out I decided they were actually going to be a really good example for this slide, so I left them because I wanted you to be able to see them. But when I say that it might have effects on our careers or our professions or social approval or disapproval, covering those spots might make a difference if I'm going into a job interview. It might make a difference in nobody who's on this call is going to be like, oh, Lindley has acne and that's ugly, and I'm not gonna buy anything from her. Like that's not a thing, especially in this space. But at the same time, I had that little niggle of vulnerability, that little moment of, oh, maybe I should cover these because maybe people won't take me seriously if I have that, if my face looks ugly. These are the things that are just in the back of our mind, in our heads all the time. And we get to pick. We don't even have to be consistent in what we pick. It is okay to choose from moment to moment what those power dynamics look like for you in that moment. Um, Whether you need safety and security in that moment, or whether you feel like you can find some power in rejecting that beauty standard. You get to decide. The fact that there are outcomes either way doesn't mean that you don't have the autonomy to decide. And that also extends to how you show up in pictures. But there are also outcomes that are bigger than just you. And so, as you are thinking about potential outcomes, you might also consider what the kids around you are going to hear. If you have children in your life or younger people, um, what are they going to hear? What are they going to take away from your actions and your choices? What effect might it have on larger systems? If you are able to get into photos, feeling and appearing like your authentic self, what kind of permission might that give other people around you, or like I said, kids who are in your life, to be themselves as well? Because yes, individually, Kim Kardashian has more power than we do to create culture. Like any one of us as an individual, as a single person. Um, by the virtue of being someone who has an audience on the internet, I have more power to create culture than someone who does not. Um, as a white person, I have a little bit more power than someone who is not. And these power dynamics get super complicated interpersonally, but the point is that we collectively influence our culture. And if you are able to get in the photo as your authentic self and be yourself, you are giving somebody that much permission in their own life to do that as well, or to join you in that photo. And so it's really cool because we can influence more people than just ourselves through our choices. And thinking about power in photography. So as I was putting these together, there is kind of a tale, a meme in the pre-internet sense, that somewhere on the planet there is a tribe of people that when photography first became widespread, considered it like it wasn't okay to take pictures because it would capture your soul. So I went looking for like the origin of that. Like, okay, what tribe is that? And I somebody might be able to prove this differently, but as far as I could tell, um, researching, that wasn't actually a thing. It was a thing that maybe some white people said that sounded true, and so it got picked up. So we have this myth that some people believe the camera would capture your soul. Obviously, that is not a thing that people today believe, and it probably wasn't in the 1800s either. But the point is that it may not be able to capture your soul, but it allows people who see your image to have power, because it allows them to scrutinize you at a single moment in time. And so when someone, like, you don't know, I assume, the person who is in this picture. It's a small world, you might, but this person, who was a client of mine a few years ago, you don't know anything about them. You don't know what their pronouns are. You don't know where they're from, their ethnic heritage, what they do for a living, their ethical and moral systems, or anything about their body than what you were seeing at this moment in time. You don't even know where they were at. You know, all you have to go on is that one little instant that was captured. And what that means is that you have the power to fill in anything you can imagine about this person. And that power is really scary for us to hand over to other people, especially when we don't know who all is going to see an image. We don't know what outcomes that having that image in the world might have for us in the future. And it also means that, particularly for those of us who are marginalized, and and maybe who are fat or very fat, it prevents the fact that this is a standalone document of a snapshot in time. It prevents us from mitigating with our natural charisma, our natural charm, our potential explanations we might give. I don't know, maybe I'm making up stories. This is not factual here, but maybe the person in this photo, um, maybe they didn't particularly maybe they weren't comfortable with the amount of coverage that that cute little floral jacket thingy was giving them. And so maybe when they showed this photo to somebody else, they said, "Oh, I was going to wear a full robe and I couldn't find it, so I had to run out the door." Like, you, having a photo out in the world prevents us from mitigating that way. It is very vulnerable. And the fact that photos are all around us every day, there are probably dozens, hundreds of photos of you from across your lifetime that exist, doesn't make you any less vulnerable just because it's common. And so one of the things that kind of accompanies this is this feeling that many plus size and fat people have, that when they see themselves, they have a really hard time accepting the body that they see, in part because they're so used to mitigating that body. And so I hear a lot, well, I can accept other people's fat bodies, but I can't accept my own. Or, I can understand that other people's fat bodies aren't evidence in a court of morality against them, but mine is evidence that I'm weak, or insert your own insult here. I'm not going to fill your heads with it. So the more that you can see yourself, the more you can literally exposure therapy yourself about it. Apparently, that's now a verb. You can exposure therapy yourself with your own images by seeing yourself, because of course you don't look like in a snapshot in time. You don't look the same way that you do when you're living and breathing and talking. um but the more that you see these snapshots captured, the more you get used to it. Just like, I don't know, if you were afraid of spiders and you picked up gardening. You're not a spider. You are inherently, okay, sorry, spiders. Unlike spiders, you're inherently lovable. And you have, somewhere there's an entomologist who's extremely angry at me right now. But unlike spiders, like, the only reason that you're scared of your own image is because you were taught that you should be. And you're allowed to, once again, we're coming back to power, to come back to that and seize that power back. So, Bree has politely said that we're both talkers, and that we should probably keep an eye on the time. So I'm gonna speed myself up a little bit here, but talking about emotion and photography, Bree has already talked about this quite a bit. She's gonna talk about it more. But honestly, part of the reason that I have this slide in here is because I wanted you to see my recent photos. Because every time I have my own photos taken, I go through this process again, just like you do, of relearning to see myself, because my body changes. Some of the images, actually, any image of me that you have seen in association with this workshop, that doesn't have colored hair is an old one, because between the time that we started developing this and today, I had updated photos taken. This is one of those. And you can see I was in the middle of twirling around on this riverbank. I was having the time of my life. It shows in the photos. And I wanted you to see this in part because it's a fun photo and it's of a very fat person, and we don't get to see that very often. And I wanted you to have this moment of joy in this presentation that is often very heavy. But also, I want you to understand that your experience of having an image taken of you, of having a photo taken, affects how you see the finished photo. If you are, if you're miserable, if you're cold, hot, hungry, thirsty, feeling insecure, you're scared, you need to pee, whatever. Your blood sugar's low, you are filled with thoughts of your own inadequacy as you're taking, as the photo is being taken, that's what's going to come back up when you see the photo. And as I say this, I'm not telling you that it is your job to make yourself have a good time while your photo is being taken. If you are working with a photographer like me, that's my job. If you are taking an image of yourself, you may or may not be able to be in that space. Hopefully someday you'll be able to get there. But the point is that it's not like these snapshots in time are devoid of context when it's us looking at our own photos. Of course, your experience is going to infuse the way you feel about that photo. Of course, it is. And expecting yourself to not have those things bubble back up is not a fair expectation to put on yourself. And so, again, this is a process. Bree is going to give you more ways to actually handle this experience of being photographed. But I really want to encourage you as you're able to experiment and see what it looks like. What does it look like when you twirl around in an outfit you really like? What does it look like when you do the arm muscle thing like Popeye? What does it look like when you run? What does it look like when you're laughing? Do you know? Because if you're gonna capture a moment in time, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be the same as everybody else's. What do you want to capture? I've had clients who have come in for photo sessions and just cried and allowed me to capture that because that was the emotion that came up for them at the time. And they decided that that was worth capturing. Of course, I'm not going to photograph somebody crying, without their consent, but I don't have any of those that I can share because those were for them, not the world. And you don't have to show any of your images to the world if you don't want to. Like, you can take things that are just for you. But what does it look like when you, quote, let yourself go? What does it look like when you do these things and you're in motion and you're living your life? If you don't know, that may be a more powerful tool than that same selfie you've taken 35 times with the phone, like at that specific angle where it doesn't show your double chin. And if that's what you need to take, that's fine too. But if you can venture outside that letting those emotions, that freedom infuse what you are doing in that image will also come back when you look at it. And maybe that moment of freedom will be useful to future you. So, last thing from me, I talked about this before that your photos are the expressions of your values and your story. Um, and the person in this image, super, super quickly, this is someone who, for her photo session, we combined her Hawaiian and Tongan heritage. She dances hula. It is absolutely lovely. With she now lives in Seattle, and so we went to this beach, and we substituted a Hawaiian beach with a Seattle beach. As you can see, it looks very Pacific Northwest. And we combined these parts of her story, and as far as I know, I'm not in her head. She was dancing. She wasn't worried about her angles or whether she looked flattering. She was busy allowing me to witness her art and capture it. That's her story being captured. What does your story look like? it's probably not going to be this exotic because mine isn't either, trust me. But but like my story isn't that it isn't as cool as hers. But your story is equally worthy of being shown, no matter what that looks like. Because you are also art. The only difference between you and this person is not a trained model. She's an artist, she's a dancer, but she's not a trained model. The only difference between the two of you is that she happened to be in that photo. Like you are just as worthy of having your story shown. So Bree is going to talk you through some actual practical ways to do that.
I love that. And I love that photo. Yes, just so for time's sake, we're a little bit over. We're still going to answer questions at the end if anyone has. So now would be the time. If you have a question, you could send it to me privately, or you can hold on to it for the end. We want to get you back in the photos, right? At the time of this recording, we are coming up on holiday season. There's usually a lot of documentation happening during the holidays. And I want to help prepare you to be able to have agency in when do I get back in photos? How do I get back in the photos? And what do I do if the photo activates me? So, one of the things you can do is you can prepare for photos with compliance. You can be like me and you can make sure that you get a spray tan, or you run your a brush through your hair before you get in a photo. You're allowed to do that. If there's a way for us to do that, if I'm going to go to this family function, I know that there's going to be photos taken. Preparing ahead, knowing if, hey, usually this group of friends is like, I want to take photos. Can you prepare your mind for that? Like, hey, photos are going to be taken today. Treat this as the trauma it is. Treat it as though you would any other level of distress. If there's a part of you that judges the fact that you feel distress around photos, we thank that part. It's going to take a seat for right now. It does not have a microphone right now. We need to prepare for the distress or the potential distress, because part of why the distress comes in is because of what is out of our control. And your brain does not want to be taken by surprise. It cannot prepare when it happens. And so if you're out and somebody's like, let's take a photo, and you didn't prepare for it, it's going to be vastly different than if you go in knowing ahead of time. I like to set intentions for photos. Oh, I want to stop really quick. My mother once told me business casual means you brush your hair. That's very funny. I mean, there's a lot too of like, how much pressure is put on us and like how we should look from other people at certain events. I want to roll up in sweatpants, but everyone wants to take a nice photo. How do we oscillate between our agency and compliance for survival? And so for me, it's setting the intentions of why am I taking this photo? If I am taking a photo with friends and look like my hair is a hot mess, an intention might be this photo is just to remember this fun time with our friends. Or if I'm getting headshots, this photo is just meant for people to have a face to see when they come to my website, when they see, oh, I want to work with this person. Knowing your coping skills and distress tolerance skills. I think oftentimes we're like, oh, coping skills. We all do stuff to cope. We all cope. And I don't use the words like maladaptive or unhealthy. This last week, I have done a lot of game playing on my phone. There's this stupid fruit game. Oh man, it is just great. I'm like, okay, I'm stressed. Let me play that game. Do you know that? Do you have that at your disposal? That if you're out and somebody takes a photo and you didn't want to be in the photo and now you're distressed, how are you going to anchor back into safety? It might not be the most emotionally um therapeutic way. It might be playing a game on your phone. Do you know what helps you? Do you know what helps you bring you back to the moment? We have to give ourselves unconditional permission, and like full unconditional permission to take photos based on internal motivation and not external motivation. I can imagine family members being like, come on, you got to get in the photo. I'm allowed to say no. I'm allowed to say no. And it's allowed to make them uncomfortable. And if you're a recovering people pleaser like me, You might also think like it's just easier to get in the photo than it is to fight. That's okay. Like you have the agency to decide. And the judgment that might come up, that's again can take a seat next to fear or what was the other emotion we were mentioning before. Right now we just want to prepare so that we can not be surprised when we're in photos. My favorite tool though is breaking up the photo experience. And so when I take a photo, when I'm working with clients on photos, I encourage them to break the experience up into three different parts. If you know a photo is going to be taken, there is a before process. Can we prepare ahead of time? The intentions of like what is the photo supposed to be? What is our distress tolerance? What can we focus on? What is in our control? I also think that during, right, when the photo is being taken, then you remind yourself of those intentions. Utilize those coping skills that we thought about and give yourself radical permission to be uncomfortable, to not want to be in the photo, to be struggling in the process. The only person judging you for having a hard time is you. And so you're the only one that can let yourself off the hook in that moment. Yes, would it be ideal? We're not shooting for ideal here. We're shooting for good enough. And there's a perfectionist part of my brain that doesn't like that. I hear that part, it can take a seat. We want to make being in photographs tolerable, not distressful, not trauma. And some of the intentions that I often will think if I am taking a photo and I don't like how I look, I don't like how my body looks, I will say something like, we're going to look back on this with kinder eyes. How many of us have had photos that we hated? I just posted this a couple days ago. Photos that we hate how our body looks. And then when we look back at the photo, we're like, wow, I don't feel that way anymore. I know that that's what's going to happen. We are going to look back at this with kinder eyes. Think of ahead of time, right? On your phone, what are things that you can say to yourself that you actually believe? This is the difference between affirmations and what I call impactful truths. What do we know to be true? What are some things that you can remind yourself of? And I'll get into that. One of the most radical things you can do is give yourself permission not to look at the photo. Maybe you're out with your friends and they want a screenshot and they are like, "Can I post this?" And you're like, "I don't want to see it." Like, go ahead. There is some freedom in that. I've had folks say, "I can't do that. I need to see what they're seeing." Fine. Can you give yourself permission to do that? Can you give yourself permission though to not like it? Right? Can we temper our expectation of I'm gonna love this? There was a photo I had posted in that dump that I had shared where I remember as the person was taking these photos, I didn't like any of them. I didn't look how I thought it was going to look in my brain. And when I look at it now, I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted it to look like. I just wasn't seeing. And so I think that we have to remind ourselves that our views are distorted. We may not always see what is right in front of us. And that can depend on a lot of things. And so impactful truths are reminding yourself of things that are true. Can we remind ourselves that, you know what? I wouldn't judge anyone else for this. This is frustrating and this doesn't define me. I am allowed to use compliance for survival. This does not undo all of the body image work that I have done. And, I think back to 2019 Brie, who wanted to do the exposure. And I can get in clothes, like, I can get in photos now with far less clothing, far less makeup, and there are pictures I don't like, but I no longer have a story about the not liking. I can say, "Oh, I objectively don't like this, the way my body looks here," but it no longer has a story of, is this gonna impact my values? Is this gonna impact my ability for love and belonging? Because people who were gonna judge me were gonna judge me whether I was wearing more clothes or not. And managing the distress as it arises. I think the part that really gets us here is how we want it to be. We got to temper those expectations. Setting the boundary of not looking at photos of myself after they're taken actually changed my life. I love that, and I'm so glad to hear that. Um, there's no right way to heal. And I think for many of us, we want there to be a roadmap and easy steps to follow. But this is not diet culture. This is healing. And it's hard. And if nobody's told you, it's going to get harder before it gets better. But this is what healing has looked like. These are two testimonies from clients that I've worked with who were undoing their own body grief. They learned to rewire their thoughts around taking photos. They were shocked at the neutrality they felt about their body and the radical self-love and gratitude that they felt towards their current selves. They were surprised that they no longer spiral or dreaded photos or being in photos. And the best part is that they got to become part of the memories again. Y'all, hating fatness is an eradication. Fat people have always existed, and we always will exist. And you deserve to be part of those memories, regardless of what your body looks like. And I hope, if nothing else, that this class can help you to do that, to decide with agency. I had been looking through my phone and I found this. This is a picture. I hosted a retreat for my providers in Montana, and we got to go to Yellowstone, and it was a bucket list item, and it was snowing, and it was the most perfect day. And I did not, in my mind, look photo ready. And I also could not take this photo. And somebody messaged me and said, "This picture gives me hope." Oh, man, I'm gonna start crying. Makes me want to keep fighting. Thank you for sharing your joy as well as your fear, anxieties, and sadness with the internet on the world in the internet world. You don't know what by just getting in a photo can mean for someone else. That your kids or your nieces, your nephews, your loved ones. I'm so happy that I got in photos with loved ones who are gone. This is the agency that we have, and it has been taken from us. We get to reclaim that. So, oh, we are just so grateful. I know we are so over time, folks. If you're on this call, you have questions, please stay till the very end. We want to take those. I'm Lindley, I'm good. I'm good to stay for as long as there are questions. We want to just go over really quickly with you. If you're on this call, how you can work with us. If you are struggling with picture grief, specifically for with Lindley and for me, if you're realizing that picture grief sort of shows up in other areas of your life, and you're just needing somebody to help you sort through the misaligned values and the beliefs of knowing there's a head to heart disconnect, and you're tired of missing out on life because of how you feel about your body, and you're interested in taking some courageous action in 2024. I am opening up one spot in my body griever coaching. It is a 3-month package. I have some folks on this call. If you work with me already, this is not for you. Like, you hold your horses, okay? This is for new folk only. I love my people. They are like anything. They're like, let's sign me up. I'm like, this isn't for you. So the program is biweekly coaching. You'll have access to me via Messenger, that as things come up in real time, specifically through the holidays, when you go to the family event and somebody talks about being on Ozempic, or you go to the friend gathering, or they put, a weight loss challenge up at work. I can be there in your back pocket to support you. You'll also get not only access to all of my self-study material, including my body griever modules and the vault. You'll also get access to my ongoing community called the club. And in the new year, this program is going to be raising its rates. I'm going to be offering it at 4 payments of 750. But if you join me in 2024, you save $500, and you'll be honored at our current rate. So I'm actually going to drop that link here. There's an application. If you're like, I'm interested, but I have questions, there's an opportunity on the application for you to schedule a discovery call with me before committing. So you're welcome to do that. And Lindley, I can see those notes. I don't know if you're intending me to see the
Mhm. I didn't realize I had the whole window shared. So these are well, they were my notes. I yoinked them back to my main monitor.
You're all good.
Um, it was some of my presenter notes for our thing, but I'm like, "Oh, what am I sharing? Are there diary entries in there?" There wasn't actually anything
All good.
exciting, but I had to check. Um, so see, this is what we talk about with vulnerability, and maybe, yanking we all yank each other out of the fire occasionally. Um, we cover for each other. So, so my offering is a little bit different from Bree's. Mine is much more targeted because, you've seen what I do as power in photos. So it is very focused on photos. It's called Scene. Bree was the one who helped me come up with a name for Scene, and so that was where Unseen, our workshop that we've been in tonight, came from as well, because of this concept of literally and metaphorically being seen in our bodies, seen in our stories. And when I talk about people not being modeled and being seen, I swear I'm going to be really quick with this, y'all. But this person, again, not a trained model. We met at a convention in Las Vegas, and I said, "Hey, you want to walk around the hotel and take some pictures?" And this is what we came up with, and it's one of my favorites, because this was somebody who was willing to take a chance on being seen and was willing to. Part of this woman's story is being very, very sensitive about her underarm wings, that you can see, and something that she's always been very sensitive about, but it's what makes this photo, because it gives her those wings. Um, but yeah, so the SEAM program is, it's a smaller, relatively program, and it's a 6-month program, which makes it sound like a big, intense thing. But it just means that you have 6 months to use everything in it. That way you have time to let things take effect. But SEEN is really about what we're seeing right here. So this is a collage of celebrities hiding from the paparazzi. But I also, as I looked at these photos, I felt like my teens and 20s, I felt like I could have been any of these people. And our relationships with celebrities and not allowing celebrities to have privacy is a whole different discussion. But I wanted to pull these photos in here because I feel like hiding behind things and not wanting to be in the photos. Um, I I should have found one of Kim Kardashian hiding from the paparazzi. That would have really brought this full circle. But these are random celebrities. We've all been here. We have all wanted to hide, from being photographed, especially when we're not prepared for it. And these folks are exercising their autonomy in the only way that they have at that moment. But if you've ever pulled your jacket shut so that your belly wasn't shown, this is you. We've all done it. But seeing takes this dynamic and it really drills down on getting you prepared in this very practical sense, with the things that Bree has been talking about, especially with this emotional component as you have photos taken, because this comes out of my experience with my actual photo clients. Because what happens in your typical mainstream photography experience is you go get photos done, you show up with no emotional support whatsoever. They take some photos of you, they throw an online gallery at you, you pick your photos, and they say bye. And that is when we have spent our whole lives being told that our bodies aren't worthy of being seen. That's a really raw, harsh experience to have. And so that's where I started out too. I always had the body acceptance component to my work, but from a photography standpoint, I started out doing that stuff too. And I learned really quickly that that was not good enough. And the more emotional support and body image support that I gave my clients, my photography clients, the better experience they had at the session, and the more they liked their photos, and the more they were able to use those photos to further their body image and not just not just share them on Facebook once and then never look at them again. And so 8 years of observing and adjusting and creating these emotional support strategies and tools for clients is where Scene came from. And it's a program, like I said, it is valid for 6 months once you sign up, but it combines one-on-one time with me, coaching with me, with resources and community. Because I can tell you that you're worthy of being seen all day, but having the community to back that up is also really important. Because almost everybody needs some level of support beyond click, get some photos, pick them, go away. Like that's not a good experience. Almost everybody needs more than that. Sometimes I will have a client come in for photos who is has reached that zen-like state of body image where they're just like, they don't need that extra support, but it's really rare. And usually those people are ones who have a really robust support network around them anyway. Because so they don't need it from me because they already have it. But particularly for people who don't have that in their lives, the more support that I'm able to give them, the better the whole thing goes. And so eventually, actually, Bree was the one who said, Lindley, why are you not offering the support component of this to everybody around the world? Because I had only been offering it to my actual photography clients. And so Scene came out of that. So I owe that to Bree. Um, because now anybody, whether you are working with me as your photographer or not, can take advantage of this. And so it's designed to be used when you're getting photos taken. But you can use it with existing photos. You can just have a couple of coaching sessions with me and not have an event coming up. But it's designed to be used before, on the day of, and after somebody else is taking your photos. So if you're getting married, if you have a wedding, like you're going to be in somebody's wedding partner party, if you're going to be going to a wedding and you think you might be in photos, if you're getting headshots done, whatever. If you're going to have a boudoir session, you can come in and schedule a photo session with me here in Seattle, and add Scene onto it. But you can also use it with any other photographer anywhere. Um, and it is going to give you the support and the tools you need to come in and be confident at the session at wherever you're having photos taken. We meet beforehand and we talk about really customized strategies. So tonight we gave you these really general things. This is customized to you, to your situation, your history, your family. I get information from you beforehand and we come in and do really targeted coaching. The day of, I give you text message support, so you can text back and forth with me that whole day, and get support. Have a friend in your pocket giving you, whatever support you need. Then we meet after. We go through the photos together, so you don't have to be alone when you look at them. We do exposure therapy. We follow up on whatever we talked about the first time, and we really do that. It's a container for that emotional experience. Then you get access to all the events I do within that 6 months. You get access to my community, which is the Body Liberation Blanket Fort. That's on Discord. And that is a 24/7 group of really awesome folks who are hanging out and being diet culture chat free the whole time. And also my Body Liberation Library. I'm seeing some nods because some of the folks who are here tonight came from the Blanket Fort. And I love you very much. But yeah, and then you also get my Body Liberation Library, which is a whole bunch of self-study things that I have created and also that I've curated. I do have some equity pricing on that. You to get some money off if you are in a marginalized group. And I'm going to put this in the chat as well. You're going to see
There's
windows
a
popping up here.
lot of love on this photo. It's just so sweet.
Yeah, so that photo is another one that is very meaningful to me personally. I don't normally photograph weddings, so this was for friends, local friends of mine. And I picked it for this slide purely because you can really see you can see them literally like gazing into each other's eyes and perceiving each other in a way that just I will not tear up. I won't tear up. I will not tear up. So at any
Beautiful.
rate, that is $497 for the 6 month access. I have put in both the page on my website to get to the more information about Scene and also my contact. there in the chat so that you can click on either one of those. This is currently waitlisted. I do not currently have any open seats for it, but I encourage you, if you are interested in this, to get on the wait list, and you'll be the first to know when a slot opens up. Um, uh, Rachel, I'm going to come back to that in just a second when we start questions. Thank you. Um, and then also, this is something that is open right now. You can sign up for this and get right on my calendar for it. This is a much smaller, even more targeted intensive with me. The posing intensive. It's 60 minutes. Once again, it is customized for you. You tell me in advance, this is my aesthetic, this is my gender presentation and identity. I like more feminine poses or masculine, or I like both. And any events that you have coming up, and I will come in on Zoom with you, bring in a whole set of posies, whole set of poses that are customized for you, coach you through them, and give you a set of posing tools that you can use either for a specific event or just in general. Because the biggest thing I hear from people about photos is, I don't know what to do with my hands, or I don't know how to pose. And if you're working with a pro, they should be telling you how to pose. That's their job. But not everybody does. And it is such a confidence booster for people to be able to come in and have things in their pocket already. So you can sign up for that by going to the contact on my website, sending me a message through it, and saying you want the posing intensive, and you can get on my calendar right away. And that is 97. Rachel had asked, Lindley, if I don't live in Seattle, can you recommend body inclusive photographers in other cities? Um, in general, yes, it depends on the city. Um, Sometimes I know people in other cities that I can vouch for. Sometimes I can ask around and find you somebody. If you go to my site, there's a start here. At the top of the website, there's a link that says start here with a little flame emoji by it. On that page, there is a free ebook on how to find a body positive photographer in your location.
Amazing.
You can also travel into me. I will happily tell you where the best hotels are um, here locally, and I also do travel sessions occasionally. But yeah, I am happy to help you find somebody that is in your area that is going to be relatively body safe to work with. All right. This is how you can work with either of us, where to find us. Um, for Bree, can I just put that in the chat for you?
Sure. Yeah, and I just wanted to make a comment on you had said like a photographer should be doing the
Mhm.
the thing for you. As somebody who's gotten a lot of photographs done, there are times when a photographer will tell you to do something, and then I'm like, my body doesn't do that. And so
Mhm.
that is why, one, having an informed photographer could be really helpful, but two, knowing yourself and being able to be like, yeah, my body doesn't do that. So mm,
Making that clickable. There we go. All right, so that's Bree, you wanna you wanna talk through your half? I'm just rolling right along.
yeah, you can find out how to work with me in the most up-to-date way through this link, and it's on my Instagram page. If you're not following me on Instagram, come hang out. We have a great time. And I also have a podcast, and Lindley and I have a podcast episode. So if you haven't heard that one yet, I definitely recommend checking it out.
Yeah. And for me, this is already in the chat, so you can click on it directly. Oh, thank you. A little bit of love in the chat for the podcast episode. But yeah, I'm at bodyliberationphotos.com/contact. I'm on Blue Sky a lot these days. That's a Twitter alternative where I'm spending most of my social media time. And I'm just at Lindley on Blue Sky, which is bsky.app. Excuse me. And on Instagram at Body Liberation with Lindley. All right, we've gotten the questions.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording here, and I haven't gotten any messages. So if you have a question now that you'd like to ask, um, feel free. I'm trying to figure out how to stop the recording. I try to figure that out. If anyone has any questions, let us know.
I'm just gonna talk for a second, and if you have a question, feel free to take yourself off mute. You should be able to. Um, but as people are thinking about their questions, I'm gonna say right quickly that when you are working with a photographer, whether that is a friend or a professional, whether it's a professional you hired or not, yes, absolutely. Um, you have the right to tell them no. There we go. You have the right to tell them no. You get to set boundaries. You can set boundaries with a professional. You can set boundaries with a friend. You can say, "I'm not doing that pose. It doesn't feel good to me." You can say, you can say, "I'd like to try something else." You can say, "I need to pee." You can say, "I need a minute. I need a minute without a camera, facing me." We take breaks all the time when I'm working with people. We take breaks for bodily needs. We take breaks because it gets too intense for them. Getting photographs taken, it should not be an exercise in your personal endurance, physically or emotionally. Like, you get to set boundaries there just like you do anywhere else.
Lindley, do you have the ability to stop the recording? It's not like it doesn't even come up as an option. If not, we'll just keep recording.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.